as we've heard from the organic team, statistics abound, suggesting that acquisitions frequently fail to achieve their promised synergies, or they fail altogether. We can all think of a million examples. Given the many challenges, ranging from integration to cultural mismatch that we've heard about, isn't it possible that when you build a company by acquisition, you're really building a house of cards?
Whether you're doing an acquisition or not, this is what you need to do. You need to have discipline, you need to have accountability, you need to hire people with talent, you need to have a good structure and infrastructure, and you need to have a mission. So regardless of what direction of growth you're going to have, you're not going to have any growth if you don't do those things well. The second thing is, if you are not doing those well, don't even think about an acquisition fixing it. So that's the base. You have to have a foundation. Secondly, planning. You don't do an acquisition without a good plan. You need to take the time to do that. You need to know who it is you want to acquire. Third, integrate or not. We hear horror stories about integration. You can not integrate a company that you decide to acquire because they have the technology that you need, because that's the direction of the trends. For example, you've got a core product, the chances are the trends are showing in 7 years, that product, the greatest competition is technology. You don't have the people or the assets to do it. You purchase a company that can, but you let them be innovative if you're not an innovative company. You can separate the two. It's not an always integrate situation. Thirdly, you do not always need to turn to private equity. There are many ways. I have numerous people that I know that did not go out to get the cash to buy.
There is a ton of capital out there, and it's a great time to do acquisitions. When you look at the continuum of capital, once you run out of senior debt, and let's say that's at 4%, the next tranche would be some kind of mezzanine capital. The coupon rate on that is 12%, and then warrants on top of that. And then if you go to private equity, they're looking for a 30 to 35% IRR. Why do I say it's a good time with those statistics, or those metrics? It's because there's a lot of senior debt capital out there. I can get an answer on an acquisition line in 72 hours. What are the quotes? LIBOR plus 175 to 200 basis points. I can't remember, and I've been kicking around a long time when we've had those kinds of rates. So it's a very good time to do that acquisition that you've been thinking about.
The key constituent people you need to integrate, if any, from a cultural standpoint, and you can address not only culture, but should also address economic incentives. If you can align your key players with equity stakes moving forward, you can do an acquisition, and you can get people all pulling in the same direction. That doesn't mean you can ignore interpersonal integration, but it also means that people become more amenable to it.
You know, debt for high-risk companies, whether it's characterized as debt or equity, actually has about the same return. So a debt instrument you're going to get as a software company is going to really look like an equity investment. But having said that, if you're a small revenue-sized company with a break-even EBITDA, your access to capital, certainly on the institutional side, is extremely limited. You're going to go the friends and family route, which is a route to go anyway, because it's the cheapest capital, because friends and family are happy if you double their money in 10 years, whereas institutional investors are never going to be happy with that result. So if you want to have access to capital, you want to be more valuable as a target to acquire, you really need to grow your revenues. And to do it organically, great, but at some point that engine is going to stop, you're going to miss the windows of opportunity to be acquired, and you need to come up with something a little more innovative. That doesn't mean it's easy, but you need to do your due diligence, you need to do the integration, and you need to think about why you're acquiring a company and then go out and do it.
So let's go back to 2007, and you merged or you acquired a company and things are going great, and then 2008 hit. And you had exhausted all your cash, as you tried to deal with the acquisition and all the post-merger, post-acquisition issues that you have to be challenged with. So now you're in a tough boat because the market has changed and you're not prepared to deal with it, you're leveraged. One of the other things I didn't hear about from our counterparts is they didn't talk about employee attrition or customer attrition. It's great to have all the planning and good structure and a mission and accountability and discipline, but you make the merger, you make the acquisition, and then the employees leave. Maybe they're top executive level that you really needed, or your customers leave because they're seeing that things are not going well. I think those are some of the things you have to think about.
One of the things we heard was that you need to be disciplined, you need to fix the foundation, you need to do all these great things, and I agree with that, but statistically, it just points out that most companies that go through an acquisition don't do that. I'd also ask the question, is this something you really want to do because money is easily obtained? I'm not sure if you do something just because the cash is on the table. You really need to think of it if it's in the best interest of the company and what you're doing, not just because money's available.
One stat that I am familiar with is that small business creation and growth in the United States constitutes the vast majority of GDP. Correct. Something like 80%. I don't accept the premise that these are mutually exclusive activities. I think really what you're asking is, what's the applicability of the theory that we're talking about, organic versus acquisition? And I think that's tied significantly to the life cycle of the company in question. If it's a startup company, you're not going to acquire anybody, because you don't have the capital to even fund yourself, right? You have to go out and get the capital to do that. If it's a 10 million plus revenue company, then you have inflection points that you have to decide, do I want to use other people's money to help leverage this, or am I going to do it based on my own generated sales? And what's the quickest way to get there? And then it goes on up the scale, right? And then the third piece of it, I think, is if it's an owner-managed or founder-led company, it gets to the point I made earlier, is what's your time frame? If you've got 10 or 15 years, you can get through what Deb said. You can get through the ebbs and the flows of the economy with the organic model. It's slower, but there's less risk in many circumstances. You know, the counter argument would be, of course, that if you don't grow fast enough, then you're going to flatline or regress, and I understand that. But organic growth gives you generally, in our opinion, more control over the process over a sustained period of time. If the exit is accelerated, then a lot of what we're saying probably is undercut, and you're going to shift to what they're talking about on that side of the equation.
According to the SBA, 78% of all businesses in this country have no employees, 0 employees. There's 6 million businesses in this country with employees, and this is from memory, so I hope I'm right, 18,311 companies in this country that have over 500 employees. So organic growth is the driver. When they say that 78% of all new jobs are created by small businesses, they're primarily being created by independent people that are starting a business, not by companies that are adding employees.
The company that you're starting from needs to continue to grow organically. You're not going to stop. It's very hard to stay on the fence when you have a business and say, I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing here and acquire another company. So they really do operate simultaneously, right? If you decide you're going to grow and you want to grow, you're not growing fast enough organically, and you want to grow through doing an acquisition, there's a little more that you can tell. You can tell what the revenues are going to be. You can tell what kind of people you're buying. You can tell what the end result's going to be and what kind of profits you're going to generate. So those key indicators are going to be a little bit more clear from an acquisition perspective than they're going to be from an organic growth perspective. So if you have capital and you have the choice as to whether you're going to do an acquisition or whether you're going to grow organically, that sometimes you can dedicate that capital towards organic growth and not get there and lose the opportunity to do an acquisition. Now, I agree with you. When you do the acquisition, you have to make sure you maintain, the employment of the people. You have to make sure you maintain the revenues and the customer base. But again, it comes back to understanding what you're acquiring and how you're going to integrate that and what you're going to do to protect those assets that you're buying in the form of contracts and people.